Hey, this is Rob Anspach, and welcome back to another edition of E-Heroes for those keeping count. This is episode 322, and my next guest hasn't been here since episode 128. So almost 200 episodes ago. So I want to bring back Kevin Eikenberry, and we're going to talk about his latest book, Flexible Leadership. So welcome.
The good news is, Rob, that you did have me back. It's been 200 episodes, but at least I am back, and I'm glad
You're
to be back.
back. Yeah. And that book looks enormous
No, it's
compared to mine. Well, look at this.
200 200 pages ish.
Yeah, I keep them. I keep them about 120. But yeah, 200 pages is great. So 200 episodes. That was almost 5 years ago. We talked about your book, Remote Leadership.
Yeah, long distance leadership, probably
And
long distance
how
leader.
is that
Yeah.
one? How is that one different than your new one? What things have improved?
There's a lot different actually. So first of all, when we had that conversation, the long distance leader came out. I think we actually had our conversation. You'd have to check, but the book came out before. Back y'all probably remember when Corona was still beer,
Mhm.
and it wasn't a virus. And so I know the book came out before that. I'm not exactly sure when we had our conversation, but that book and the two that followed it in the long distance series were all about the the work scenario that we found ourselves in, right?
Yeah.
Leading teams at a distance, not seeing each other all of the time, and so that was the focus there, and the focus on the two books that followed.
Yeah, and I
This
apologize. The title of the episode at the time was Remote Leadership, but yes, your book was not called Remote Leadership. It was
That's
called.
all right. That's all right. And so, what's different is that. So first of all, this book, we're living in a world now where some people are working remotely, some or all of the time, right? And so certainly that reality is reflected in this book, but this book is not about leading a team at a distance or anything like that, where that was very much the practical application of that book, and then the two that followed, long distance teammate and long distance team. So this book is really for leaders, whatever your situation is, whether you're leading a small team, a big team, whether you're in the C-suite or you're a frontline leader. It gets at the idea, Rob, that the world is changing.
Yeah.
It's changing fast. There's more uncertainty than ever. And so, if we just sort of looked at this logically and said, well, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, pick whenever you want to pick, we're leaders generally excellent? And the answer would be, well, there were excellent leaders, but certainly not generally excellent. And so all this stuff is changing, and we could still say leaders aren't generally excellent. There are certainly excellent leaders, not all of them. And so if the leaders that are leading today are trying to lead the way they led 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and the world is changing and they weren't doing all that great then we probably need to be thinking about making some adjustments. And so the idea of being flexible, Rob, ultimately gets to the idea that, the context in which we're leading, the situation that we find ourselves in, leads us to think about flexing our approach given that context. And so that's probably the single biggest idea of the book, that we have to consider the context of our situation and then intentionally move from doing what's natural or our auto response, our habit,
Mm-hmm.
and giving people some guidance on ways to think about how to adjust and flex on a variety of dimensions.
Yeah, I mean, COVID really changed the way we think and how we do things. And I'm not saying that work from home was the answer, but there's still a lot of people out there that have gotten so used to working from home. I mean, I've been working from home since 2001, so for me, it is what it is. But a lot of my team members are all over the world. I have two in Canada. I have one in Arizona and other places. So, and so my direct leadership, there is nothing, you know. So every time I get on a Zoom or a phone call or a text, I have to lead, but a lot of times tonality and even my sarcasm doesn't work through text or email and sometimes even Zoom.
Yeah.
So
Very true.
it's and then you have the cultural, so how the people in Canada think are a little different than how we think. Although, maybe our personalities are the same, you still have their holidays are different, that their hours are different, and so we as leaders have to think about more than just our own area.
100%. In fact, if we're leading a team that's distant from us in some way, uh, the need for us to think more carefully about how we communicate, to your point, is more important than ever. I mean, like, communication is hard to start with, right? And so here's what I always say to people, like, as a leader, have you ever said this or thought this? And I know the answer is yes. You've thought or said, how many times do I have to tell them? What part of this don't they understand? Didn't they read the email? Didn't they watch the presentation? Didn't they follow along with the PowerPoint? Whatever, like, we say, like, I told them, why don't they get it? But see, communication isn't just sending messages, right?
Mhm.
Communication is message sent, message received, message understood. And those second two, we can only influence. The first one's in our control. What we say, how we look, that's in our control. The rest of it, though, we're only in a place of influence. And to your point, when we're doing it at distance, we're making it harder to do that because we don't have all the modalities as readily available to us. That's
Mhm.
for sure.
Well, and then even in our current uh, situation where you see the news of companies letting go thousands of employees. I mean, I think it's Facebook is just eliminating 5%, and that's a lot of people.
Mhm.
When Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X, what did he do? Remove 50% of the workforce right
Big
away.
number. Yep.
And so you're looking at all these companies and thinking, wow, that leader must be a real jerk to let people go. But it's not that, you know. We on the outside look at it and think that, but the people on the inside, they're probably thinking that too. But the board, you got the leaders, you got and they're all looking at ways to cut costs. Now, maybe leadership could be a little bit better. Not laying them off during the holidays. It seems to be the big thing. And I've had to fire people, and I don't like it. And it's not say they say, oh, it gets better with the more you do it. No, it doesn't.
That's not necessarily a skill I want to get better at, right?
Right.
So, like, obviously, there are outside situations, outside conditions that might lead us to make, to have to let go of a number of people or whatever, to your point. And yet, I would say, as leaders, I don't want to get good at that skill because I want to do a better job of attracting the right talent and then retaining the right talent so I don't have to get rid of the talent that isn't necessarily meeting our needs. So to me, while there are certainly times when a layoff is not completely leadership's fault,
Right.
and I'm not now talking about sort of big L leadership. I'm not necessarily talking about organizational meta, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, like, you as an individual leader in your department, in your division, in your team, in your small company. I'm suggesting that if you're going through that cycle regularly, there's some other things that you need to look in the mirror about, right? And too often what leaders do in that case is they say, well, it's not my fault. I got the wrong people. Well, but who picked those people, right? And who nurtured those people and who developed and who coached those people. So there's certainly a piece of that belongs to us as leaders. And unfortunately, many don't think about it that way. Now, your listeners, Rob, are different. Like, they probably do understand that and recognize that. This
Well, we
is
would
this is
hope.
after all a bit of a self-selected audience, right?
Right. Well, and here's the thing: as entrepreneurs, a lot of us have developed an ego. We want things done our way, or it's the highway. And as I've gotten older, and I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years now, I am really trying to let my ego go. Because if I want to scale, if I want to go bigger, if I want to produce more books, it can't always be my way or the highway. I have to allow other people to do what they're good at. And if I'm micromanaging them or telling them, hey, you have to do it my way, we're going to just butt heads and then I'm going to have to fire them. And I don't want to do that.
Let me make an observation about that cycle. And I know that a lot of the audience listening to us, watching us, are entrepreneurs, right? And so your point of a lot of people choose that path because they want to be in charge, that they don't want to be micromanaged and all those sorts of things, and that's perfectly fine. But my observation is this: often then, what we end up doing is subjecting others to exactly the things that we didn't want to be subjected to, which led us to take a different path. So if we want to grow our businesses, whatever that looks like, then we have to think about what I believe is the core goal or objective of leadership is to reach valuable outcomes with and through others. And that means that we've got to be clear as a leader on what those outcomes are. That's great, but we can't do it alone. And too often as leaders, we find if we think it has to be the way we would do it, then we may find ourselves doing it alone or doing it by people simply or merely complying and saying, yes, boss. But those were exactly the kinds of people that you didn't want to be led by,
Mm-hmm.
however long ago it was that you started. So I think we have to take a step back as leaders, and I'll just take an example of that idea of outcomes and others. And I'll say that that's one of the flexors in this book, Flexible Leadership, that if leadership is about reaching valuable outcomes with and through others, if you think about those as ends on a continuum, uh, most of us would think, well, am I leading for outcomes or am I leading for others? And I would say it's always an and, it's not an or. And so we make a false choice when we say, well, am I focused on outcomes or am I focused on the folks? And the reality is where we should be on that continuum likely needs to change. So
Mm-hmm.
as your business is growing and as there are literally things now that you don't know the way you did. I had someone come into my office an hour and a half ago and say, hey, Kevin, I need help with this. I'm like, you are talking to the wrong guy. I haven't done that in so long. I'm the wrong guy here. Right. And so that's a point of saying, I can't always be on and I'm not just saying me, but all of us, we can't just be on the outcome, the my way or the highway, because there are negative dominoes that fall when we always lean there. And I'm not saying that we need to lean toward others and do whatever they want and give them whatever they want or what they need because we're afraid they're going to leave. I'm not saying that's the right answer either. My point is the ends of the continuum are almost always less than optimum answers, that the
Mm-hmm.
right answers are somewhere for your situation with that person based on where your business is in its growth pattern is somewhere in between those. And as leaders, and I'm glad you brought it up as this idea of it's my way or the highway, because as leaders, if we want to be more effective, which means we need to be more flexible, that means that we can't just do what's natural or what we like, but what will get us the best results,
Right.
which isn't necessarily our natural response.
Yeah. I mean, even for me, I've produced 50 books over the last 11 and a half years since 2013. And we have 17 books on slate to produce in 2025. And usually I produce 4 or 5. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to do this if I'm battling my team, if I'm telling them exactly how things have to be? I got to drop the ego. I got to say, look, in order to get this stuff out, in order to produce it in the highest quality, I got to, you know,
I got to let go, right?
I gotta
I've got to be clearer about what my role is and what the role I want of others to be.
go.
How do I help them best serve the outcomes we're trying to reach?
Yeah.
And that's a question in and of itself, which moves us beyond our natural inclinations, which is sort of the big idea of this book, that we tend to have an identity and define ourselves as a leader in a certain way. And maybe you've taken some sort of leadership style assessment or whatever it is and say, well, this is how I lead. And what I'm suggesting is that if that's if that's where you say you are and that becomes your identity, it becomes very difficult for you to flex in any way to get better or different results based on the situation that you're facing today, which could be different than the situation of yesterday or next week. And so the core idea here is we have to stop and say, is my natural response the best response
Yeah. You know,
right now?
I've been, reading up on a lot of past entrepreneurs like Walt Disney, like Milton Hershey from Hershey Foods, and even Steve Jobs. I mean, all three had different leadership styles. You know,
For sure. Yep.
Disney's was more about vision, legacy. You know, Milton Hershey was all about family. But Jobs was all about design, and you could see Steve was not the friendliest person to deal with. You read all these articles and they say he was a monster when it came to delegation, when it came to, and I'm thinking, but the dude made billions. How does that equate to, your leadership? I mean, money doesn't make you a better leader. Sometimes it makes you a bigger asshole, but it's you have these three powerhouses, Disney, Hershey, and Jobs, and I think Jobs probably made the most money, but his delegation was horrible.
Well, so here's my observation about the three of them, since you bring the three of those guys up, and that is that their how probably is different,
Hmm.
right? The approach that which they took. Uh, but what I think you would find to be people would find to be interesting as a connective tissue between the three of them is that they all had a very clear why.
Mm.
They had a very clear why for why they were building their company, why they were leading, what they were, and what they were trying to accomplish, and how it mattered. Right. So Hershey wanted to do the things that he did, but it ultimately led to everything they did around the Hershey Foundation and everything for children and all that stuff. So like doing it for a purpose, right? Disney to create the happiest place in the
Hmm.
world, and Jobs to create products that would sort of be immortal, if you will. Like design, how do we design them in ways that they become ubiquitous, and my words now, not his. And so I think the thing for us that we can take from the three of them, even if we don't necessarily want to emulate their approaches to leading,
Hmm.
and I'm less a student of Hershey than the other two, but the other two both had some times when they weren't all that red hot, easy to work with,
Right.
right? And the point I would make is this: that as a leader, do you have that clear and defined why? Because if you don't have that why, doing this work is hard,
Hmm.
right? And we will revert to our habits, and we will lean in perhaps too much to our ego and those sorts of things. And so, I would urge all of you listening to really get clear about what it is, why it is that you're choosing to lead, why it is that you're choosing to build your company, because you have other choices. And if
Hmm.
that's the choice that you've made, why does that matter? And having that deep why will sustain you. But the other thing it will do is it will challenge you to be more flexible in your approach, because now it's not like I'm not doing this to do it my way. I'm doing this to get this result, which means I might need to adjust.
Right.
And I might need, and I would even say not might, I will need to adjust. I will need to flex.
Hmm.
And until we have the mindset awareness that I might have to flex, there's no chance that you will flex.
Yeah. And everything, for me came to a kind of a difference in October when I started writing my book Legacy, and for me it was not so much my leadership style, but how I wanted my employees, my vendors, my contractors to understand that this is what I stood for. These were my core values. This is what I wanted to leave behind, and how can they help me, leave that lasting legacy or that impression on others. And that's why I wrote that book, because I wanted to teach other people the whole meaning, because a lot of times we as entrepreneurs get into business and it's all transactional, and we don't ask our customers anything. They don't really care about us. They don't know our why. They just contact us again when they need us. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs need to understand that legacy is a long game, but it's not something that you shouldn't think about. You should think about it, but a lot of us don't think about it until we're 20, 30 years into business and going, "Oh, damn, what should I leave behind? How should I act? How should I be?" Then it's too late.
Except for everyone who's listening to this conversation. Because well, however old you are, right? And maybe you're saying, man, I wish I would have been thinking about this 15 years ago. But we can't go back. We don't have a time machine. But what we do have is a choice today to make about how we're going to think moving forward. And so I think listening to what you've said, Rob, I think gives people maybe some pause to stop and think about that. And I would echo, as I said earlier, that idea that figuring out your why is critical to your success as well as to your happiness and mental fitness and spiritual well-being, and we go right down the list, right?
Well, out of all the bosses that I had prior to me becoming an entrepreneur, the one that stood out was when I was 16, working at a grocery store. His name was Mr. John Herr, and I think he was the most amazing, gentlest leader I've ever known. He had the most impact on how I treat people. Yes, I was just the bagger at a grocery store, but he taught me how to
Paper
properly
bags, I'll bet, even.
paper bags, and he taught you how to properly bag them so the customer would not be upset when they got to their car. And so every time I go to the grocery store, there is no paper bag. It's all plastic. They're throwing stuff in there. I mean, we used to wear a tie. We had, slacks, and it's like now you go in, they're wearing jeans and they got their headphones on. Oh my God. Just, yeah, I know 40 some years have passed, but the lessons I learned from Mr. Herr
Mm-hmm.
have shaped me in ways that he probably doesn't even know. I mean, he died last year. Um, he was in his 90s, but I cannot tell you all the other leaders that I've had. None of them gave me an impression the way he did.
Well, that's a you want to talk about legacy. That's another thing it's worth us thinking about for a second, and that is that I often tell leaders that in workshops and such that being a leader, one of the things that is true about being a leader is that we have a big responsibility, right? Back to my outcomes and others comment, we have a responsibility that we're setting a vision, an outcome that's valuable, useful, important, meaningful, etc. We have a role, an important responsibility around what is that we're leading towards, and we have a responsibility to the folks that we're leading 100%. And if as an entrepreneur, we have a responsibility to hopefully have us be successful enough that we can help them maintain a lifestyle and all those other things. So there's a big responsibility, and that can weigh on us for sure. But leadership done well is also a tremendous opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to be a Mr. Hurtis in someone's life, to lift them up, to encourage them, to make a difference for them. And what we forget as leaders often, Rob, is that people are watching us
Mm-hmm.
all the time, whether we know it or whether we don't, whether we're thinking about it or whether we're not. Like, we get up in the morning, look ourselves in the mirror, and hey, this is just Kevin, another day, and yet everyone else is looking at me and saying Kevin, comma, boss.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are paying attention to what we do and what we don't do, what we say and what we don't say, and so we have an opportunity to make a difference for them beyond just the work,
Mm-hmm.
but as you described, Rob, for something much bigger and much deeper than that.
Yeah, it's, and I do think that your book would resonate with a lot of people out there. I do think that we need to be more flexible as leaders. You know, uh, in the same respect, though, we have to allow them to understand who we are. I'm very sarcastic, and maybe my personality rubs people the wrong way. That's who I am. Maybe I'm not going to change, but I can adapt. I can be a little bit more flexible to those people who have the skill set, maybe don't like sarcasm. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say this. I'd say, who we are is who we are, and that's fine. And I mentioned the word identity a little bit ago. I think that it's important for us to be clear about who we are, uh, and and yet I don't think that that should become an excuse, right?
Right.
So let's just say, and I'm just going to pick something now. Let's just say that you're a person. I had this conversation with someone a couple days ago. That you're a person who is direct and to the point, and perhaps your voice, the tone of your voice will raise at times that may or may not mean that you're angry or upset, but it may very well come across to others as that being the case. Let's just take that as an example. That is your natural response. That's sort of who you are. But to use that as an excuse not to be a more effective communicator is the opposite of what I'm talking about, what we're talking about, right? So like I can recognize that that's my natural response, and yet we all know that not all of our habits serve us, right? So perhaps the thing we need to think about is how do I get more intentional about some things that I need to flex, not because it's always bad to be those natural responses, but sometimes it may not serve us or others, and so are we able to be aware of that intention and then intentional about making adjustments as needed?
Yeah. Yeah. And you also look at, if you're just got hired on a team, and there are people on that team that have been there 20, 30, maybe more years under the same management, that tells you something. Because in today's day and age, most people last 2, 3 years at a job, they don't like the management, and they leave. Or management is the reason why they're leaving. So when you get hired by a company and the same management's been in position for that long a time and people aren't leaving, that tells you something.
For sure. I think it definitely does. And again, that goes back to legacy. That goes back to the fact that leadership is not just a responsibility, but an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
For sure.
So how do they get your book? Is it on Amazon?
Well, as we're having this conversation, you can pre-order it on Amazon. But what I would suggest people do I'm going to give everyone a gift because they came here. So if you go to kevineikenberry.com, I'll spell that in a second, KevinEikenberry.com/gift. And if you go there, we're going to give you a gift. I'll tell you what that is in a second. There'll be information there about the book. You can learn more about the book. But the subtitle of the book is Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. And so what I did a while back is to create a masterclass on building greater confidence in ourselves and others as a leader. And we're giving that masterclass away to all of your listeners, Rob, as a gift. $79. We sell it every day. But today, and because or whenever people happen to be listening to our conversation, kevineikenberry.com/gift will get you to where you can learn more about the book. And it'll give you that free gift, and we hope that you'll take advantage of that masterclass to build your confidence, the confidence of those around you, so that you can get the kinds of results you want and need as a leader.
That's fantastic. And that kind of goes to the next question. How do people get a hold of you? But you've already said they can go to your website, kevineikenberry.com. But can they find you other places?
Well,
Social.
you can find me if you can remember how to spell my name. You can probably find me everywhere. I mean, obviously I'm on X and I'm on all of the social channels. Probably the best place though to follow me and get ongoing regular content is on LinkedIn. So it's probably the best place to go. You can find me there. I'm fortunate enough to have written a bunch of or created a bunch of LinkedIn learning courses. So if you happen to have LinkedIn Learning or you're a pro member of LinkedIn, you can get a hold of all of my LinkedIn Learning workshops there. And that'd be useful to use perhaps, but just that's a good place to go to find me on LinkedIn, as well as, of course, our website, kevineikenberry.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been switching a lot of my attention to LinkedIn, and it was funny. I look back and I guess it was a few weeks ago. LinkedIn sent me an email. Hey, congratulations! You've been on LinkedIn for 17 years. I'm like, 17? What? 17 years? Has it really been? And I'm looking back. I guess it was. I mean, it was. I got on LinkedIn before I got on Facebook, so it must have been like, I don't know, 2007. Yeah, do the math.
Yep.
And but I didn't get on LinkedIn until or Facebook in 2009. And I used to get all my clients from Facebook. And over the years, I think there's over 10,000, 11,000 followers now on LinkedIn. And after I maxed out my friendship level of 5,000 on Facebook, I thought, okay, and they keep restricting me. And I took it to LinkedIn, and I just get better conversations, I get better contacts, better referrals, and people on LinkedIn spend more money. So,
There you
and
go.
and they're all entrepreneurs, they're all leaders, they're all CEOs or executives of some sort in their business. And so what I find is Facebook, yeah, they have friends, family, a lot of moms, um, but it's not my market. So, those out there listening, maybe Facebook or LinkedIn, or it doesn't matter which one, but find one that you can relate to, that you get the most traffic from, and be there constantly. And you're going to find that your sales are going to increase, your clients are going to increase, and you don't have to be omnipresent everywhere. Just pick one and be the best you can be there.
Yep.
Any last words that you want to part?
No, I just thank you for having me, and I'll just encourage everyone who's listening to go again at kevineikenberry.com/gift. But what I want to leave you with this: that being a leader is an opportunity. As I've already said, it's a responsibility, of course. The thing is that when we choose to lead, and as an entrepreneur, you've chosen to lead, you may have thought about your role as being one of managing a company or finding customers or building a product, and all those things are true, but you're also leading others, and it's a opportunity to make a difference. In fact, no one uh, no thing can get better in the world without someone leading. And so we all have the chance to do that, and hope that you will do that. I hope you found this useful. And Rob, thanks again for having me. 200 episodes later.
Yeah. I can't believe the podcast is still going, but people want to listen. So here we are. For me, when I started out as an entrepreneur, it was, I just wanted to do something on my own. And as I grew the business, the first business was a cleaning business. I had to have employees. And then when I started this in 2001, slowly bringing on vendors and contractors and associates, and you lead in different ways, but I never thought I'd want to be a leader. I always thought, hey, I'm just going to be an entrepreneur and sell stuff. But in order to sell and to educate and to motivate, you need more people. You need reliable people. And you can't have reliable people if you're always pissing them off. So lead better. So anyway, thank you for being here, for gracing us with you and your book, and for the audience. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Adios.